ويرى سليمان أن المشكلة في الدعوة إلى الإسلام تكمن في أسلوب الأشخاص الذين ولدوا مسلمين بالفطرة، وهذا يعني وجوب تغيير أسلوبهم في الخطاب.
The example I've given about this to friends over the years is that the problem for someone who may wish to embrace Islam, if they are mixing with or being given dawah by born Muslims, is the analogy of the man standing by the river. And I'll use this story, if I may, something I made up, but it seems to stick in my mind and many people seem to understand it. If you're born in a country on one side of a river, and that river is wide and it's fast flowing and the water is deep, maybe it's cold, you're not inclined to jump into that river and cross it, no matter what the country looks like on the other side. And what I found as I studied more and more about Islam was I was looking across this river to another country, metaphorical country, the world of Islam, and I was attracted to it, and it looked beautiful and it looked interesting and it seemed to be full of very nice people, but they were on the other side of this river. And when I shouted across to them saying, how do I get there, they could only say, we don't know, we were born here, we were always here, so how can we tell you? And it went on like this. I know many people that have managed to embrace Islam through the help of born Muslims. Alhamdulillah, this is wonderful, but it didn't work for me. I've got a stupid, questioning, logical mind which just demands lots and lots of questions and lots of answers. And if you're a born Muslim, you can't answer it. So, to follow my analogy, I had to wait until I could shout across the river and say, how did you get there? And a man shouted back, oh, I crossed over a bridge, it's just down the stream. I can show you where it is, follow me. And I was able to follow in the path.
ورغم كل هذه الإرهاصات في تركيا، إلا أن الإسلام لم يدخل قلب سليمان حتى هذه اللحظة. ثم جاءت خطوة الانتقال إلى دولة الإمارات لتشكل مرحلة وخطوة جديدة في هذا الطريق.
This is what happened to me when I came back to Dubai several years later, after my time in Turkey, which had been instructive and which had led me towards Islam. But it wasn't until I came to Dubai and met suitable people that I was able to cross that bridge. After I returned from Turkey to Dubai, things had changed in Dubai, as you'd expect they would, and some things had changed for me. My life had changed. I was no longer married to the non-Muslim lady that I'd been married to before, and I was looking for a new start. I didn't know what sort of new start I wanted. I just thought it was something to do with work. And so I came to a new place to work in Dubai, but a different employer. And I was extremely fortunate at this point. By Allah, I found myself working for some very excellent people, and the person who was my boss became one of my great friends and still is to this day, Mr. Majid Balhassa, a great man. And he immediately took some interest in me. He realized that I was kind of lost in many ways and knowledgeable in some ways, but foolish in others. And he had a lot of tolerance for this and a lot of humor and a lot of kindness. And he would talk a lot with me in the evening after work. We would discuss, or maybe we'd go out for some dinner, maybe a little bit during the office also. And he would help me to study the right things and talk to the right people, answer some of my questions as best he could. During this time, he actually coined a little description for me, which was kind of unkind in some way, but it stimulated me to react, and I think he knew this. He called me the worst sort of kafir. Now, many of you may go, oh my gosh, this is a terrible insult, but he meant it kindly, and he meant it just to get my interest. What he meant by this was, I was not a Muslim, and yet I knew so much about Islam, and yet still hadn't embraced it. And this, of course, is very bad. We're taught that if you are ignorant of Islam, and you're not brought to it, and it's not given to you in any shape or form, you're not born to it, then no harm in this. You know, you have not done anything wrong. But if you learn a lot, and you understand a lot, and you still do nothing with it, then maybe there's some doubt on you. Anyway, he didn't press me on this, he just kind of pointed it out in a nice way and allowed this to go along. But still he could see my objections were all to do with logic. All of these questions about custom and practice, all of these things that were born out of my secular upbringing. I'd never really been a Christian. I'd just been some sort of atheist or agnostic. I continued to ask questions, and they were questions he couldn't necessarily answer himself because, as I'd said earlier, he was that man stood on the other side of the river who'd always been on the other side of the river. And so it wasn't easy for him to explain things to me in a way that I could understand. Fortunately, after some time, I think it was maybe after at least a year, some men came into his orbit, some businessmen, some European Muslims, who were trying to start a great project. Their project, particularly at that time, was the wish, the great desire to reintroduce the Islamic gold dinar as the currency of the Muslims. This seems like, even now, seems like an awfully big desire and a huge goal, and it was then, it remains so. But he brought this to me and he said, "Hey, you're a finance man, what do you think of this? There's some European Muslims who are trying to bring a practical aspect of Islam. The idea is that you cannot pay the zakah unless there is a gold dinar to pay it with. So you only have four pillars of Islam, and you must find the other one by some proper means." So he said to me, "What do you think of this idea?" Of course, I'd learned all about Islam, I knew what he meant by these pillars, and I said, "Rubbish, it can't be done. There's no way that they can overcome the financial system of the Kafirs, and this will fail." And he said, "Well, why don't you come and tell them this?" I think I was in a bad mood, and I said, "Yes, sure, I'll tell them. I'll come and meet these men."
ولكن هل التقى صاحب المزاج السيء بهؤلاء الرجال؟
And so he took us out, and I met these men. They were Spanish and Germans, spoke English very well, very educated, very wise, great scholars. They'd reverted to Islam 10, 20 more years before, and their knowledge was very great. These men are still doing great dawah all over the world. So we discussed. We went to this restaurant, and we talked and we talked. We started with their dinner, and I asked my questions. And for the first time, I started to get answers that I couldn't challenge. They weren't just answering my questions from a religious point of view, but they were also answering from a point of view of logic and all the scientific sense that I thought I had and I thought I had as my objections. We talked until midnight, and the restaurant threw us out. They got tired of these men sitting there debating, and they put us out into the street, and we talked further. Another hour we stood standing in the street in Garhoud, watching the traffic go by and arguing these points of religion and philosophy. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was a Wednesday night in the middle of the week, they said to me, "So, do you have any more questions?" And I said, "No, I don't. I've run out of questions." So they said, "Now what? You're going to embrace Islam?"